The snow fell like 1,000 tiny accusations, blanketing the Montana ranch in silence broken only by his mother's voice, sharp as the winter wind. Neil Xavier, she had said, her Bible clutched like a weapon, and he did, 16 years old and trembling, jeans soaking through as the cold seeped into his bones, a penance for the sin he could not unconfess. 20 years later, in the dim glow of his Seattle apartment, that same chill returned not from weather but from the phone call that shattered the fragile peace he had built brick by careful brick. Xavier stared at the screen, the name Eleanor, glowing like a ghost from a life he had buried deep. His mother, the woman who had once dragged him out into the storm, forcing him to his knees in the snow until his lips turned blue, all because he had whispered to her, in a moment of desperate honesty, that he loved like the boys in the stories he hid under his mattress. God tests us, boy, she had hissed, her breath fogging the air between them. And you are failing. He had knelt there for what felt like hours, the flakes melting on his eyelashes, until his older brother Caleb pulled him up, muttering about getting pneumonia, but never once challenging her decree. That night, Xavier had packed a single duffel bag and hitchhiked to Billings, vowing never to return to the sprawling Thompson Ranch, where the cattle lowed like forgotten regrets and the horizon stretched endlessly flat. Now, at 36, Xavier Hale lived in a world of his own making, far from the barbed wire fences and fundamentalist sermons that had choked his youth. Seattle suited him, with its perpetual drizzle that washed away the sharp edges of memory, its hidden bars where men like him could steal glances over craft beers without fear of judgment. He was a graphic designer for a boutique firm in Capitol Hill, crafting logos for queer-owned startups and indie bands, his days filled with the hum of his MacBook and the laughter of colleagues who knew his story in fragments but never the raw core. His apartment overlooked Lake Union, a modest one-bedroom with exposed brick walls adorned by his own ink sketches, abstract swirls of color that hinted at the turmoil he kept locked inside. There was Marcus, too, his partner of 3 years, a barista-turned-novelist with a laugh that could thaw the iciest doubt. Marcus knew about the kneeling, the flight, the years of therapy that had pieced Xavier back together like a mosaic of jagged glass. "You're whole now," Marcus would say, tracing the scar on Xavier's knee from that frozen night, a faint white line like a map to his fractured past. But the call came on a Tuesday evening, as Xavier stirred risotto in their tiny kitchen, the scent of garlic and saffron mingling with the rain tapping against the panes. Eleanor's voice was thinner than he remembered, rasped by something deeper than age, coughing between words. "Cancer," she said flatly, as if diagnosing a sick calf. "Stage 4. Docs say months, maybe less." There was no apology in her tone, no softening of the edges that had carved him hollow. Just the facts, delivered like a rancher's ledger. "Caleb thinks you should come, for the funeral planning, or whatever this is." Xavier gripped the wooden spoon until his knuckles whitened, the steam rising like unspoken fury. He wanted to hang up, to let the line go dead as he had let their bond die years ago. But beneath the anger, a treacherous current pulled at him, the boy who had once craved her approval like oxygen. He set the phone down and turned to Marcus, who was perched on the counter scrolling through his latest manuscript edits. "My mother," Xavier said, voice steady but eyes betraying the storm. Marcus slid down, wrapping arms around him, the warmth a stark contrast to the memory of that snow. "You don't have to go," he murmured into Xavier's neck. "She's had 20 years to reach out. This is her mess." But Xavier knew it wasn't that simple. The ranch wasn't just land. It was the soil of his shame, the place where his queerness had been branded a curse. Going back meant digging up roots he had spent decades transplanting. Yet, as the night wore on, sleep evading him in the tangle of sheets, he felt the pull of unfinished business. What if this was his chance to stand, not kneel, to face the woman who had frozen him out and say, "Finally, I am not broken." By morning, tickets were booked. A red-eye to Billings, then a rental car north through the high plains, where the Rockies loomed like judgmental sentinels. Marcus saw him to the gate, their kiss lingering, a talisman against the cold. "Call me every hour," he joked, but his eyes held worry. Xavier boarded with a knot in his gut, the plane lifting off into the clouds that mirrored his uncertainty. Below, Seattle shrank to a glittering promise, a city of reinvention where he had found not just survival, but a semblance of love. Up here, the altitude pressed on his chest, and he closed his eyes, letting the hum of engines drown out the echo of his mother's command. The drive from the airport was a descent into memory lane, the asphalt unspooling like an old film reel, past the diners with neon signs flickering open 24/7, and the billboards advertising feed stores and Jesus Saves revivals. Xavier gripped the wheel tighter with each mile. The Thompson Ranch lay 30 miles outside Great Falls, a spread of 500 acres that had been in the family since his great-grandfather homesteaded it post-World War II. Caleb had taken it over after their father died of a heart attack 10 years back, turning it into a working organic beef operation that supplied markets in Bozeman. Xavier had followed the updates sporadically through mutual friends on social media, glimpses of sunsets over grazing herds and Caleb with his wife, Lena, and their 2 boys, all posted with captions like, "Blessed beyond measure." No mentions of the prodigal son, of course. Xavier was the unspoken shadow, the one who had fled to the godless coasts. As the gravel crunched under his tires, pulling up to the familiar weathered barn, the air smelled of hay and manure, laced with the faint metallic tang of impending snow. It was late October, the kind of crisp that bit at exposed skin, and the sky hung low in gray, threatening flurries. Caleb emerged from the house first, a broad-shouldered man in his early 40s, flannel shirt tucked into jeans, his face weathered like the fence posts he mended. "Zav," he said, the nickname slipping out before he could catch it, pulling him into a hug that was stiff at first, then genuine. Over his brother's shoulder, Xavier saw Lena in the doorway, her smile tentative, holding a toddler on her hip. The boys, 8 and 10 now, peeked out curiously, whispering to each other. No sign of Eleanor yet. They settled in the kitchen, a vast room with pine cabinets and a farmhouse table scarred from decades of meals. Lena poured coffee, strong and black, the steam curling like questions unspoken. "She resting," Caleb explained, jerking his thumb toward the stairs. "Chemo wiped her out today." Small talk flowed awkwardly about the ranch's solar panels, the boys' soccer league, Xavier's work in the city. "Heard you got some fancy award for that queer art show," Caleb ventured, then winced at his own words. Xavier chuckled dryly. "It's called graphic design, bro. And yeah, it pays the bills." The silence stretched, heavy as the quilts on the line outside, until Caleb cleared his throat. "Look, she's different now." Church softened her. "Reads that progressive theology stuff." Xavier nodded, but doubt coiled in his chest. "Different how?" Enough to erase the image of her standing over him in the snow, rosary beads clicking like judgment? He sipped his coffee, the bitterness grounding him, and asked about the will, the practicalities that had lured him here. Caleb spread papers on the table, talking inheritance shares, the land division that would leave Xavier with a token plot if he wanted it. "She insisted you get something," Caleb said. "Said it's only right. Only right." The words twisted like a knife, and Xavier excused himself to the porch, needing air that wasn't thick with pretense. The swing creaked under his weight, the chains rusting from years of neglect. From here, he could see the pasture where he had once chased calves with Caleb, their laughter echoing before everything fractured. The snow from that night had melted into mud, but the chill lingered in his veins. Footsteps approached, soft and shuffling, and he turned to see her. Eleanor Thompson Hale, 68 and frail, wrapped in a shawl that swallowed her frame. Her hair, once a stern bun of chestnut, now hung loose and silver, framing a face etched with lines of pain not just from illness. Her eyes, the same hazel as his, met his without flinching. "You came," she said, voice a whisper carried on the wind. "No welcome, no warmth, just statement of fact." He stood, towering over her diminished form, the boy who knelt now a man who towered. "For closure," he replied, the word landing like a stone in still water. She nodded, sinking onto the swing beside him, the space between them a chasm of years. "I prayed you would," she murmured, and for a moment, he saw the flicker of regret in her gaze, a crack in the armor she had worn like righteousness. But prayer hadn't stopped the snow then, and he wondered if it could melt the ice now. As dusk fell, painting the sky in bruised purples, they sat in silence, the first tentative bridge over a river of resentment. Inside, Caleb called them for dinner, meatloaf and mashed potatoes steaming on plates, and Xavier ate mechanically, the flavors of home both comfort and curse. That night, In the guest room that had once been his, he lay awake listening to the house settle, the creaks like confessions. Marcus texted goodnight, a heart emoji that felt worlds away, and Xavier typed back, "I'm here." But where was here exactly? In the heart of the storm he had fled, or on the edge of something resembling reckoning? The days blurred into a rhythm of ranch life laced with hospital visits. Great Falls General was a squat brick building on the edge of town, its corridors smelling of antiseptic and stale coffee. Eleanor endured treatments with stoic grace, her hand occasionally brushing Xavier's as nurses bustled. "Tell me about your life," she asked one afternoon, for drip beeping softly beside her bed. He hesitated, then spoke of Seattle, the pride parades where rainbows painted the streets, the gallery openings where his designs hung like flags of defiance. "And the man?" she pressed, her voice careful, as if stepping on thin ice. "Marcus, he's everything." The words hung, and she closed her eyes, a tear tracing her cheek. "I was wrong, Xavier. The snow. God, the snow. I thought I was saving you." Her admission cracked something in him, a fissure through which old grief poured. He wanted to rage, to demand why it took death's shadow to whisper sorry. Instead, he squeezed her hand, the gesture small but seismic. Back at the ranch, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Caleb pulled him aside one evening by the fire pit, sparks dancing into the night. "She's trying, Zev. After Dad died, she went to that counselor in town. The one for folks like us. Folks like us." The phrase stung, implying a shared burden Xavier had carried alone. "You knew," he accused, voice low. "That night. You pulled me up, but you never stopped her." Caleb looked away, poking the logs with a stick. "I was scared. Of losing the family. Of what she'd do next." Betrayal bloomed fresh, a weed in the garden of forgiveness he was tentatively weeding. To escape, Xavier drove into Great Falls, the city lights a pale echo of Seattle's glow. He found himself at the Copper Mug, a dive bar on Central Avenue with rainbow stickers peeling on the door, the only queer spot in a 100-mile radius. It was karaoke night, the air thick with cigarette smoke and off-key renditions of country ballads. He nursed a whiskey, the burn steadying his nerves, when a voice cut through the din. "Mind if I join? You look like you could use a wingman against the ghosts." The man was mid-30s, built like a ranch hand but with the easy swagger of someone who had seen city lights. Dark hair cropped short, stubble framing a crooked smile, jeans faded and boots scuffed. "Jude Harlan," he said, extending a hand calloused from. "What? Artist. Sculptor, mostly. Welded cows out of scrap metal for the county fair last summer." Xavier laughed, the sound surprising him. Xavier Hale, visiting from Seattle. Ghosts are optional, but they tagged along. They talked, words flowing like the whiskey, Jude sharing stories of growing up gay in Billings, coming out to a family that disowned him until his sister's intervention. "Found my way back on my terms," he said, eyes crinkling. "Now I make art that screams what they tried to silence." There was a spark there, electric and forbidden, the kind of connection that whispered of possibility amid the pain. When Jude leaned in, their knees brushing under the table, Xavier felt seen, not as the kneeling boy or the dutiful son, but as the man he had become. They exchanged numbers, a promise of coffee tomorrow, and as Xavier drove back under star-pricked skies, the ranch loomed less like a prison and more like a crossroads. But the idol shattered on the fourth day. Caleb cornered him in the barn, pitchfork in hand, face thunderous. "Saw you with Jude last night. In town. Folks talk, Zev. Mom's fragile. You stirring up old shit now." The accusation landed like a slap, revealing the undercurrent of resentment Caleb had harbored, the brother who stayed painting Xavier as the selfish one. "Stirring up? I'm here because she asked. Because you're too chicken shit to handle the will without me." Words escalated, voices echoing off hay bales, until Caleb hurled the truth like a grenade. "She wrote you out years ago. The plot? That's my doing. To get you here. To make her face it before she goes." Betrayal crashed over Xavier, wave after wave, the fragile bridge crumbling. He stormed out, tires spinning gravel as he fled to the only refuge, Jude's workshop on the outskirts, a Quonset hut filled with metal sculptures twisting like souls in torment. Jude took one look at him and pulled him inside, the door clanging shut against the world. "Talk," he said simply, handing over a beer from a mini fridge humming in the corner. Xavier did, the story spilling out in torrents. The snow, the call, Caleb's deception. Jude listened, then drew him close, their embrace fierce and grounding. They're scared, man, of losing control. But you're free. Their kiss was inevitable, born of shared wounds. Lips meeting with a hunger that bordered on desperation. Clothes shed in the dim light of welding lamps, bodies mapping each other like uncharted land. Jude's hands tracing the scar on Xavier's knee with reverence. It was raw, urgent, a reclaiming in the midst of unraveling. Afterward, tangled in a sleeping bag on the concrete floor, Jude whispered, "Stay a while. Let me show you this place without the chains." For the first time in days, Xavier slept deeply, dreams free of snow. Word spread as it does in small places. By morning, Eleanor's call came, voice trembling. "Come home, son. We need to talk. All of us." The all included Caleb, Lena, even the local pastor who had counseled her. Xavier arrived at dusk, Jude's truck rumbling behind him, a silent show of solidarity. The kitchen table was set with tea and lemon bars, a domestic armor against the storm. Eleanor sat at the head, frilier than ever, but her eyes burned with purpose. "I heard," she began, glancing at Caleb, who shifted uncomfortably. "About the will, about why you really came." Caleb mumbled apologies, but she waved him off. "No, the lie was mine first. The snow was my lie, thinking love could be punished out of you." The room held its breath as she continued, voice gaining strength. "I read your articles, Xavier, the ones in that Seattle paper about pride and healing." Stole Caleb's laptop to print them. A stack of yellowed pages lay before her, dog-eared and underlined. "You built something beautiful from my ugliness." "And Jude." She turned to him, smile tentative. "Welcome. Thank you for seeing what I couldn't." Tears came then, not just hers but Xavier's, Caleb's, even Lena's. Confessions flowed. Caleb's guilt for not protecting him. Eleanor's descent into isolation after the divorce from their father, who had known Xavier's truth and died silent. The pastor spoke of grace, not as doctrine but as action, and for once, the words didn't chafe. As night deepened, they moved to the porch, blankets draped against the chill. Jude sat beside Xavier, hand intertwined, a quiet anchor. Eleanor pulled her shawl tighter, gazing at the stars. "I have a gift for you," she said, producing a small wooden box from her pocket. Inside lay a silver locket, tarnished but intact, the one she had worn as a girl. "Open it." A faded photo, young Eleanor, laughing with her own mother, arms around a boy who looked remarkably like Xavier. Her brother lost to AIDS in the 80s, the family secret buried deeper than shame. "He was like you," she whispered. "I punished you for him, for my fear of losing another." The cold gift, indeed. Not ice, but the weight of inherited grief, handed back not in vengeance but vulnerability. Xavier closed the locket, the click echoing like closure. He slipped it around his neck, the metal cool against his skin, a bridge from her past to his future. "I forgive you," he said, the words tasting of salt and release. Not absolution but a step toward it. She nodded, tears glistening, and reached for his hand. In that moment, under the Montana sky vast as redemption, the snow of 20 years ago melted into something warmer. Understanding, imperfect but profound. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance. Eleanor rallied enough for short walks, leaning on Xavier's arm as they traversed the pastures, recounting stories of the land untainted by dogma. Jude became a fixture, his sculptures dotting the barn like talismans, and Caleb thawed, inviting Xavier to help brand calves, their laughter tentative but real. Marcus flew in for a weekend, the two men sizing each other up over beers, finding common ground in their love for Xavier. "He's a force," Marcus said to Jude, and Jude grinned. "Damn right. But illness is a thief stealing breath by breath." By Thanksgiving, Eleanor's decline sharpened, her bed the center of a vigil. Xavier read to her from his portfolio, designs blooming on the page like flowers in frost. "Beautiful," she murmured, eyes distant. One night, as snow dusted the windowsill, she gathered them close. "Bury me by the old oak," she instructed, voice a thread, "and scatter the rest in the creek. Let it flow." To Xavier alone, she added, The locket. Wear it for both of us. He nodded, throat tight. She slipped away at dawn, the room bathed in pale light, her hand still in his. The funeral was simple, under that oak heavy with memory, mourners from church and ranch mingling awkwardly. Caleb spoke of her strength, Jude of her quiet courage in the end. Xavier stood silent, then placed the locket in the earth beside her. A cold gift returned not in spite, but in peace. For the boy you lost, he whispered, and the man I became. Back in Seattle, the rain welcomed him like an old friend. Marcus held him through the jet lag and grief, their life resuming with a new layer of depth. Xavier designed a memorial piece for Eleanor, a digital etching of the ranch under aurora lights, sold to fund a scholarship for queer youth in Great Falls. Letters came from Caleb, photos of the boys with Jude's sculptures, bridges maintained across miles. One spring evening, wandering Capitol Hill with Marcus, Xavier felt the locket warm against his chest. The snow was a scar, faded but formative, teaching him that love, bent and broken, could straighten in time. He had given back the cold, not as revenge, but as release, and in its place bloomed something human. Forgiveness, fierce and free.